Hi everyone, Coffee Tea Caffeino here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of the new Napalm Death record! Apex Predator. Easy meat. You know what? We're going with the Dead Kennedy. Bam! Actually, the Nazi Punks Fuck Off single, because Napalm Death has a really awesome cover of that you could look up on the internet. Napalm Death is a UK-based rock band, grindcore godfathers, death metal savages, one of the longest running and most important extreme music acts of all time. A band so volatile that on their first full-length LP, the personnel on the first half is almost entirely different than the personnel on the second half. They have gone through quite a few band members over the years, but once they started dropping albums more consistently, the lineup changes sort of smoothed out, and this current lineup has been serving them pretty well for a while. It's amazing and really admirable that a music act so extreme has been able to thrive through multiple decades, through the 80s where they were mostly a grindcore band and right at the inception of that style of music, as well as embracing the tenets of crust punk. In the 90s, they continued toying with death metal with grindcore, but they kind of hopped onto that groove metal trend that was very popular during the time. But in the 2000s, Napalm Death really returned to form and saw themselves competing with a new breed of amazing grindcore bands with even heavier, harder, faster sounds like Nasum, as well as Pig Destroyer and Wormrot. And Napalm Death stepped up and made some of their most gruesome material during this decade. The band is continually evolving and fine-tuning their sound while finding new things to experiment with and take risks with, while simultaneously looking for ways to just push the abrasive envelope. With beefier guitars and pummeling drums and Barney Greenway's vocals, one of the most ruthless metal vocalists out there. Now, we're halfway into a new decade, and so far, Napalm Death has not been nearly as prolific as they've been in the past. The only other LP they dropped in this decade so far was 2012's Utilitarian, which, while aggressive, it wasn't really a standout record for me. The more aggressive moments didn't really get my blood pumping, though there were some interesting detours on this LP, appearances from none other than John Zorn, which was a pretty awesome collaboration considering that just in the previous decade they had worked with Jello Biafra and Jeremy Josta. But with this new LP of theirs, it doesn't really seem like Napalm Death is relying at all on star power, and they're just really trying to get back to their very brutal basics. Like the album art here, the band is keeping it pretty simple, but still, with what's portrayed here, so much is said. The band has more to say than their guttural, unintelligible vocals would lead you to believe. For years, in the case of Napalm Death, music and message have come very much hand in hand, with lyrics that typically deal in the human condition, in the flaws and the follies of the world at large. And philosophically, this new album here is really no different. Apex Predator, the human race, we are prey to no one, yet insanely, we have our meat, our hunt conveniently packaged up for us. You could also say that's true of our culture and a myriad of other things. Everything comes in a box! Napalm Death showing once again true brutality is in real life, and they're just reflecting it by singing about and addressing things like violence and apathy, callousness, the mundane day-to-day of modern society, and globalization. Sonically, on this new record right here, Napalm Death isn't changing up their sound too much. They are working once again with producer Russ Russell on this LP, which again means overdriven, distorted, overwhelming bass and guitars, crystal clear, punchy, pummeling drums, and the vocals mixed so high, so high, that they're just engulfing everything else, as if all these guitars and drums are being performed within the monstrous throat of Barney Greenway. There are loads of blast beats on this record, D-beat variations, speedily strummed, dissonant guitar chords, dizzying riffs that ride sporadically changing grooves, and all of these together create a lot of tension, but the band usually ends up settling into a headbanging groove with some thrashy, mosh-friendly riffs. Occasionally, some clean vocals get worked into the mix, which also showed up on the band's last full-length LP, but on this album they are incorporated a bit more seamlessly. Like when Napalm Death switches from those guttural vocals to the cleans, they're a bit slower, more melancholy and grim. They really fit into the band's typical aesthetic, and it's not like a jarring change. And tracks that incorporate these cleaner vocals the most actually add some really epic variety to the album. Songs like Dear SLUM Landlord or Hierarchies, one of my favorites on this LP. Another pretty significant change of pace is the opener here. While songwriting-wise it's not an amazing track, it does have these heavy staccato riffs that feel kind of industrial-ish. On other cuts here with higher speeds and less subtleties, you're just getting relentless riffs and pure adrenaline. And the potential issue here, as it is with many records of this style, is are any of the songs really all that memorable? Do they all just blaze by? Some grindcore bands, newer grindcore bands, have a lot of speed and virtuosity, but really no feeling. However, Napalm Death's rage is actually very palpable on this record. Even though they've never really been the tightest, flashiest grindcore band, and that's especially true of their older stuff, they've always had an instantaneously felt rage that's made a bulk of their discography so appealing. This is true of tracks like CESSPITS and How the Years Condemn, as well as Stunt Your Growth, which have fantastic riffs and just kick ass from beginning to end. I also love the song Beyond the Pale, where you see some vocal variants there. We're switching from the guttural vocals to some wretched vocals on this track. And there are a load of other highlights on here, and they are highlights because they either feature a great riff or a really interesting segue or just a really sharp, nasty lead melody. There are a few cuts here that do feel a little less defined or distinct, maybe don't have as many memorable or exciting characteristics, like Timeless Flogging or Bloodless Coup, but by no means are these songs lulls in the track listing. Because for about 40 minutes on Apex Predator, the band really puts the listener through the musical ringer. Overall, I think this is just a really great record for Napalm Death in this decade. I'm glad the band is still around and continues to hone their sound and just find new ways to improve it or make it better, just different things to change. And what they really ended up perfecting on this album for me were just some of those huge, grand, clean vocals that complement their usual sound very well. As far as the other cuts on here go, the ones that you would typically expect from Napalm Death, while they're not particularly ambitious or groundbreaking or anything like that, they do serve as examples of the band once again doing what they do best. A lot of the riffs on this record may be kind of simple, but they are effective. Effective when it comes to stirring up things on the darker side of the human emotional scale. And above all else, I think we're getting consistent quality here, a good recording. I'm feeling a strong 7 to a light 8 on this thing. Transition! If you've given this album a listen, what did you think of it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Why? What do you think I should review next? And that's it. Anthony Fantano, Napalm Death, forever!